Hello.
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 Hello,
Morning.
everybody.
Hello,
Morning.
bonjour.
Morning.
Hello. We're gonna be muting everyone, okay? We're gonna get started real soon. It's exactly 6 o'clock.
Hi.
Hello. I think we're gonna give it just a few more minutes. If that's okay with everyone, just to make sure everybody can come in.
Okay.
Welcome, everyone. Just be sure you're muted, okay? So we're just giving it a couple of minutes. Patty, you tell me when you think we should get moving.
I think you can get moving anytime.
Okay, well, it looks like we've got how many people on?
175, 177, I see. Oh, they're coming in.
Okay, in that case, I'd like to welcome everybody to, actually, I think this is the first webinar that I've done of this kind. And this is actually thanks to Kim Bingham, who suggested the idea to bring these two ideas together. So I want to thank you, Kim. And Kim Bingham, for those who don't know, was at one time part of our team as a property consultant. And then sadly, she left me to become a mortgage broker, except that the good part to that is that we then were able to partner up in a way because financing is so important. And she heads the International Department for Private Rate. If you are not muted, please mute yourself. And Patty, I think you can make sure everybody's muted. Also. Okay. So there's just a little bit of housekeeping rules. And this is the way this is going to work. This is basically a brief presentation just designed to outline the ins and outs of finding and financing property in France. Part one is going to be with me, finding French property. And I'm going to speak probably for about 30 minutes. And then Kim's going to talk about how to finance your French property. And at the end of both presentations, we're going to do a Q&A. And please keep your questions general and submit them into the chat box. And when you do that, Patty, who's on with us, my assistant, Patty Sadowskis, she's going to be organizing the questions and making sure that we see the most important ones. But if they're personal questions, I would hold those for when you work with us on a personal basis. Now, please make sure you mute yourself throughout the webinar. And at the very end, we may be issuing some polls because we'd like to know a little bit more about you. And also this presentation is being recorded and we are going to make it available to the people who attended. So on that note, I'm going to get started. So this is French Property the American Way and how to find your French property. Just briefly, I'd like to let you know who we are. We are a fully licensed real estate agency in France, but we operate very differently than an average agency because we really are property consultants and we work more for the buyer than the seller. I like to think of it as French Property the American Way because we are mostly North Americans. We do have Australians and some Brits on our team, but we like to think of ourselves as managing things in an American way. Our services include consultation, and our consultation really starts from the beginning with making the move to France, as well as property investment and renting property. So it covers a wide range of consultation. I've been here 25 years and I went through the hard knocks and I can tell you I know how to make this happen. And then of course we do property search. So we go out and find property either for rent or for purchase. We do offer sales and listings, which are mostly properties that our own clients have purchased and have asked us to resell because I don't want to sell a property that I don't believe someone should buy. So they're usually pretty specific. We do also assist people in either purchasing or selling a property, and that has to do with if a property has already been identified for purchase and committed to, then we can help the process from beginning to end and liaise with the buyer or the seller via the notaire to the other buyer or seller. We also do property appraisals. We provide financing resources. Kim is certainly our top of our list. We have associates for renovation and decoration. You probably all know about Martine Di Matteo, who's done amazing work for us. And we also manage property. So we can manage rentals. Now, the reason we exist at all starts with there's no MLS in France. That stands for Multiple Listing Service. No MLS, I'm going to explain in more detail what that really means, but in essence, you have to go to all the different individual agencies. There's no one central marketplace. The process is different in France. The laws are different. The language is different. The currency is different. The culture is different. Every single thing that you ever felt about or knew about buying and selling property in the US or Canada or elsewhere, throw it out the window and start over because you are in France and it's a different animal. Now on the MLS, the idea is that every agent has access only to his own listings and they really prefer not to share their commissions, which is about 5% in the asking price. Now, that attitude towards commission sharing actually differs in different regions of France. In Paris, the agents will not share their commissions, period. In the south of France, we find that they're much more open, and in the countryside, they're quite used to it. So it really depends on where you're buying. The agents, however, still work for the seller, not the buyer. And because with the MLS, an agent has access to all properties at all time, in effect, the agent really works more for the buyer, not the seller. So the agent makes a client and they have access to everything, which is very different than the way it is here. And because the agents only have their own properties to sell, they will say just about anything to make a sale. So you kind of have to be careful. Now, the process is long and tedious and complex. In a normal situation, and I'm not talking about COVID-19 and confinement, in a normal situation, it takes 3 to 4 months from the initial visit to the signing of the deed. What happens is you visit the property, you decide you want to purchase it, you negotiate. Sellers tend to allow about 5% for negotiation. The French are not hagglers. They don't overprice their properties. It's very easy to know what a property is worth, particularly in Paris or in Nice and in the cities. And they really only allow 5%. What's interesting is that the seller is morally obligated to accept asking price. So that means if you walk in and offer asking price in cash with no loan, it's pretty much yours. And there are no bidding wars. Once that happens, and once the negotiation process is done, the notaire is notified. I'm going to talk a little bit more about the notaire, but the notaire who is the property attorney who manages the transaction is notified and begins all the process to organize all the necessary documentation. And I can tell you that that takes about a month. It can take as long as 6 months. It can take a week. But generally, there's so much documentation to pull together that it's a massive amount of work, and you have to allow enough time. Once that happens, a pre-sale agreement is signed. There are two kinds, a promesse or a compromis de vente, and that is signed by both the seller and the buyer. And there is then a 10% cooling off period within which a full retraction is possible. So a buyer is not legally obligated to make a purchase until 10 days after the signing of the pre-sale agreement, at which time there is also a 10% deposit that is held in escrow by the notaire. From that point, there's another 2 to 3 months between the signature of the pre-sale agreement and the final deed, which is called an acte de vente. So you've got plenty of time for all this to take place. The notaire is an interesting kind of specialist attorney. He's not a notary like a notary is in the US. He is a self-employed legal specialist who has public authority to draw up the authenticated contracts. He's also a public officer. And, excuse me one sec. He does quite a bit of family law, property inheritance, assets, company law, countryside law, all sorts of things that are related to anything transactional. But he also acts on behalf of the state to collect the taxes. So he's basically a tax collector. And he is the person, he or she is the person who authenticates all the transactions. Nothing can happen in France related to a property without a notaire. You cannot, an American buyer and seller cannot handle a transaction on the US side for a property in France. It has to go through the French legal system.
Adrian, I'll also just add in that to compare the notaire to what might be involved in a transaction in the US, the notaire might be considered similar to the title company, administering on all of the paperwork having to do with the closing of the
It's a very good way to put it. It replaces basically the title company. In fact, it does quite a bit more than a title company. Because with the title company, there's usually title insurance. And in this case, because they do all the due diligence and they're held culpable, they really act in a way like the title insurance. So it's even better, it's even lower risk. So they perform the due diligence. Sorry, I hope I have sorry, we got skipped. A lot. I'm very sorry, everyone. Technical glitch.
There's a lot that goes into this process, and there's a lot of information that we have to share with you today in order to explain how this all works. But that's what we're here for, is to accompany you on the purchase that you want to make. Here in France.
Thank you for fixing this and filling in, Kim, while I have my technical problem.
No problem.
Okay.
I used to work in live television.
Now it's working. Okay, we're back. We're back. See, I don't know why it's not working now. Here we go. No. Okay. The due diligence that the notaire has to do with all of these documents is diagnostics, which must be provided by the seller, which basically replaces an inspection. The diagnostics include termites, lead, asbestos, the surface area of the property, and a number of other things. So it tells you everything you really need to know about the property itself. Then there are the building bylaws, which is called a règlement de copropriété, that's provided. Also 3 years of homeowner association meeting notes so that we can take a look at what work was done in the past, what work is going to be done in the future, and it is the person who has the vote who pays the fees. So the seller pays whatever fees of the work he voted on. Then as a new owner, you would then take over that role. In addition, there are the documents that are related to the organization, the state and the financial situation of the homeowner association and the lot being sold. And then it's possible to sign by proxy. And during COVID-19, there was signatures were done what they call à la distance. They figured out a way of everyone, like we're doing with this webinar now, they arranged a way for people to sign and not having to be present. So I don't know if that's going to stay in place and we'll be able to continue doing that or not, but it was working when we were under confinement.
Yeah, it actually, I'll jump in to say that it is staying in place. It's an innovation in the notaire business.
I'm sorry, you guys. Here we go. Okay. I see now where my arrows are. I'm finally getting the hang of it. Based on the different laws and different language, there is forced heirship inheritance laws here. And it's really important to create the structure, the title of your property correctly. So there is what's called a clause de substitution, which means that you can sign the pre-sale agreement with one title and then change the structure between the time of the signing the pre-sale agreement and the final acte de vente. There is the possibility of creating a French property company, which is known as an SCI, or Société Civile Immobilière. And what this does is it allows you to offer shares in the company, which is useful for inheritance purposes. So that if you have, two people who are divorced with previous families who have come together and kids with all of their various families, and you want to give shares rather than be dictated to by the French government, you can do that. But this is a big conversation and it's something we would have together. The documents are written in French legalese, and the notaires are obligated by law to ensure that the buyer understands what he or she is signing. However, we work with English-speaking notaires and we do not need translations, which are very expensive, because as long as you're working with us, we're going to ensure that you understand everything that's in those documents. Now the culture, yes, the culture is different. The French, you sort of think they're like us, but they're not really like us. They're not hagglers. They only allow about 5% negotiation room. The seller, as I said before, is morally obligated to accept asking price. And I will tell you that if you offer too low a price, you could actually insult the seller and they could refuse to sell to you. So you have to be a little bit careful about how you manage this process, especially compared to how an American might be very open about talking about money. The French don't want to talk about money, so this has to be handled carefully. Now, we make a very big difference for you because, first of all, we search for the property on your behalf. That means that you're not out there doing the legwork. We're doing the legwork. We provide all the due diligence. We advise. We provide the resources. These are trusted individuals that we've been working with for many years. We manage the process from beginning to end, and we liaise with those resources so that all you have to do is sit back and wait till you hear from us on what we need you to do next. We have a very trusted interior architect who's on call, Martin Di Matteo. so that she can, you know, come in, voice an opinion on the property, estimate the cost of the work. And all in all, what happens is we provide a kind of an insurance so that you don't make very costly mistakes. Now, when we're out there finding property for you, first of all, it's because we have created relationships with qualified agents. I know Kim can tell you from the years that she worked with us that she built quite a nice bevy of, agents with important agencies that she could call upon, which is very different than just walking in to any agency that you're looking in their window, looking at properties. You walk in, they don't know who you are, you have no clout. We have clout with these agents. And therefore, we end up having access to the best properties as a result. And because there's no MLS, we search the internet, we contact the agencies, we seek the for sale by owner properties, and we use every resource available, including looking up and seeing the signs. And because we have acquired knowledge and experience, we can really recognize a good property. We are never going to allow you to buy an unsuitable property unless you absolutely override us. But we're going to make sure that you don't make a mistake as best as we can. So the cost of entry is high. The cost of ownership is low. The cost of entry is high because you've got 7 to 7.5% in notarial taxes and fees right off the bat from the get-go. And then our consultation fees end up somewhere between 3 to 4%. So when you add it up, it's going to be somewhere between 10 and 11% in addition to the price of the property. If you need renovation and decoration, and this is highly subjective, it really depends on the original condition, the owner's taste, and it differs in Paris as it does in Nice. Martine Di Matteo will tell you that her clients end up estimating between 2,000 and 3,000 euros a square meter in Paris. And the contractor that I have in Nice will tell you that it ends up being between 1,000 and 2,000 euros per square meter in Nice. I cannot explain why the costs are different, perhaps because the cost of living is different, therefore the basis is different. And the photograph on this slide is my bathroom in my Nice apartment, and I'm showing you this only because that tile work is an artist's tile. It's hand done. And I can tell you that that's expensive. So you can put that at the top of the range rather than the bottom of the range. And therefore it really depends on your tastes and what you're willing to spend. Now, this is just good advice. You're going to be probably moving money from dollars to euros. And when you do that, you want to use the least expensive way of making that currency exchange. Because if you use your banks, it's going to cost about 3%. But if you use a currency broker, it's about 1% in what's called the spread, the difference between the buy and the sell rate. When you work with a really good currency broker, they can take the risk out of the currency exchange and they can advise you. We recommend MoneyCorp and OFX, and there's a link on here if you make note of this link or take a screenshot, and then you will be able to contact them and set up an account so that when you do move the money straight to the notaire, you're going to get your best rate. We are recording this. We're going to make it available to all of you, so this slide will be on there. Now, the cost of ownership is quite low. In fact, it's quite amazing. You probably will be shocked to learn that the two taxes, the two annual taxes, the taxe foncière and the taxe d'habitation, are each approximately 0.001%. Now, let me put that into reality. That means if you have a property in Paris that's worth about €1 million, your tax is going to be about 1,000 euros. It's not 10,000, 1,000. I have my property in Paris is probably worth now about €1 million, and my taxes last year were 627 euros. And I know that that is shocking compared to US property taxes. So that's already a really big savings. Taxe d'habitation is paid by whoever inhabits the property on January 1. So if you own a rental property, your tenant would likely pay that. If not, it's going to be yours. And then taxe foncière is the annual property taxes. There are also homeowner association fees, and they sort of approximate 35 euros per square meter per year. Elevators and gardien and things of that nature do cost more, so you will have this information prior to signing the pre-sale agreement. You'll know how much the homeowner association fees are. Utilities, of course, vary, but they're really set to be efficient, and I find that they're very inexpensive. And even more shocking is the fact that you can have internet, satellite TV, and a VoIP phone that's free to almost anywhere in the world for 35 euros a month. And I know that the equivalent of that in the States is about $250 or more. So overall, your carrying costs are really low. Now, for those of you who are interested in a return on investment and doing some sort of a rental property, there is the possibility of short, medium, and long-term rentals. The best rentals are year-round, and the best ROI is either in Paris or in Nice. In most other places, rentals are, at least short and medium term, are actually more summer rentals than year-round, except for, of course, long-term. Medium rentals are what's called a mobility lease, and this was instituted by Emmanuel Macron, the president, and it's basically a 1 month to a 10-month rental, and it's for people who are here on business or education. Secondary properties cannot be rented less than 1 year without commercial usage designation, or they can be rented on a mobility lease or long-term. This applies to cities of 200,000 population, except that every city has the right to manage this law the way they would like. So Paris is quite different because Paris is the strictest of all the rental laws. In Nice, you can rent a secondary property up to 6 years. If it's a primary residence, then it can be rented up to 4 months a year. Now, the way we work with the client is we're going to discuss your needs, your desires, your dreams, your wishes. We're going to consult with you. That's the beginning, is to consult with you to set the parameters of the search and to determine what your goals are. Once that happens, we search for the properties, we set up the visits, and we visit the properties with you or even without you. We've done quite a lot of work sight unseen. I have lots of clients who've purchased sight unseen because they trust us to know a good property when we see it. And we will advise from beginning to end. We also negotiate the price on your behalf. We provide the notaire, the other advisors, and the resources, and we liaise with them. We can sign on your behalf with the proxy. We hold your hand from beginning to end, and we even offer après-vente services so that you're never alone in this venture. And it really takes the risk out of it. As I said from the beginning, it's like insurance. So the initial consultation can start with anything as simple as you're thinking about moving to France and you don't know where to start. I know how to do this. I've helped hundreds of people make their move to France. We can start there. We can also talk about what you're considering as an investment and what you need to determine what you need in finances, what you can afford to buy. This is where Kim comes in, and that's why we're going to be talking about this next. And the question is, have you decided if you want to rent or buy first? We have lots of clients who think initially they're going to come and rent, spend some time, and then buy later. It's not always a good idea to do that because it's going to cost you time and money to rent first, particularly if you're of an age or you're working now where it makes more sense to take your loan before you waste your time renting. So we're going to talk about that a little bit more. A consultation with me is 2 hours. It costs 350 euros. but it applies toward our other search services. So nothing is lost. And it really has to happen. One way or another, we have to start with a consultation. And I highly recommend this to get you on the right path and in order to make the best decisions. So before I close, I just want to say that, you know, we not only offer all of that, we offer a lot to what I feel is our community. We offer 3 newsletters a week. If you're not subscribed, please do so. It's Parley Paris, Parley Nice, and French Property Insider. We've done, wow, 45 House Hunters International TV shows. If you haven't seen one, I urge you to tune in. We even filmed one very recently from lockdown that's going to be a really interesting and different kind of show. And the second Tuesday of every month, we offer a coffee gathering here in Paris. Because of lockdown, we've had them as online on Zoom, and we're going to do that until September. So everybody will be able to participate even if they're not in Paris. Otherwise, it's really fun when we can get together. And we always have a speaker, and it's interesting and a great way to meet people. And on that note, I'm going to end up turning it over to Kim. You might want to make note of these web addresses, our email, info@adrianleeds.com. And if you click on the consultation request, if you go to that link, there's a form where you can actually submit a consultation. So I'm going to end the show.
Okay, and I'm going
And we're
to.
back.
We are back. All right, well, I'm going to set up my screen sharing here. So bear with me while I do that. Some of you are out there are probably Zoom Zoom professionals. I can't say that that's the case for me, but I'm doing my best. So can you all can you tell me, Adrian? Can you see my screen?
Yeah, I see it.
Okay.
Good.
Okay. Well, thanks for the handoff to me. I'm going to discuss how to finance your French property a little bit with you. Now, we can go into massive detail, but we won't be doing that. I'm going to say right off the top, there's an information form that I have available that will be pinned in the chat. It's a PDF. I'm going to ask you if you want to get pre-qualified or you have questions for me, the form would be the first place to start. Okay, so download the form. My contact information is on the form. You can email it to me and I will get back to you as soon as I can. There will be 2 to 3 day delay depending on how busy I am with lots of clients that want to come in and purchase in France, but I will do my best to get back to you and get you situated. So I'll explain that, yes, I am an international mortgage broker. I'm a consultant with my consulting company Buyers in the US, and Private Rate, which is a international team of, a team of international mortgage brokers based in France. We work the entire territory of France, so not just Paris, not just Nice, but Dordogne, Alpes, Provence, everywhere. We can look at solutions for you. Our specialization is to help non-resident buyers find their loan for their property purchase in France. Our clients contact us from all over the world. We do have a lot of British buyers, because of course the proximity, the UK with France, and we also have a lot of American buyers, and I'm actually specialized in that clientele. So welcome to all of our American friends, and happy Memorial Day too. We need to say that too.
Oh, thank you for reminding me, Kim.
Yes, for those of you that are tuning in live. So let's get on to discussing how to make your French property a reality through a mortgage. If you're just planning your purchase, you're contacting Adrian, you're discussing your upcoming search, it's important to get situated on what you can afford. So again, that 2-page borrow information form is really the start to do an assessment of what you would be able to afford in terms of your borrowing capacity. And also it's important to note, and you'll see on my form, I do mention, it's important for me to know how much cash you have to bring to the purchase. Okay, we'll get into LTVs and that in a second. That's loan to values for those of you that are new to the lingo. If you found your property, that's when things really start to happen. Now, banks will not move on any kind of pre-qualification at all, actually. What they'll do is unless you are actually a client of a French bank, then they'll put a little bit of muscle into it, and they may give you a simulation or a little initial proposal. But the rubber really hits the road once you've signed the compromis de vente or promesse de vente. So you've located your property, you've signed the preliminary sales contract, you've put your deposit in escrow at the notaire, and I've helped you assemble your mortgage file. That's all of the documentation that basically corresponds to the information that you will have put on that borrow information form initially when you'd have contacted me. Okay, so you try to be as clear as possible in the information form so I can get as accurate a read as possible for you, for your situation. When you found the property, that's when we are assembling your entire file. And I am sending it when you found the property, you've signed the compromis de vente or promesse de vente, that's when your file is going into the bank for initial proposals, firm proposals from the bank. And that's when the entire process really starts. So we also benefit at Private Rate from a large variety of banking partnerships. So we can take a look at a variety of solutions for you. So the advantages of taking out a loan. Of course, we have in France fixed and variable interest rates. Of course, it's better to leverage your cash with a loan, considering that the cost of borrowing is so low. It's less than 2% for the majority of lenders right now. So, and it has been for the better part of a year. There was a drop early last year. So it's really makes a lot of sense to take a loan instead of spending cash. Also, it's important to know that equity releases or trying to do post-financing can be really problematic. A lot of banks don't want to do it. Don't do it. They'll propose maybe the initial financing, but they don't want to do post-financing afterwards or equity release. So if you have the option between paying cash and taking a loan, you're thinking, oh, I'll pay cash and I'll just take a loan on the property later, you're probably better off looking at getting the loan initially. So the early repayment penalties are low. There are early repayment penalties on fixed interest rate loans. Variable interest rate loans do not have an early repayment penalty, but because the fixed rates are so good, that's what people take. And the payment, honestly, the penalty is relatively low. It's equal to the greater of either 6 months of interest or 0.0937, so a percent of what you have left of capital on your loan. Okay.
Kim, let me just ask you, aren't you seeing most of the loans right now coming in at about 1.5%?
It really depends on the lender, and it depends on where they're buying to. So, I can't say across the board because let's just say that we're all now kind of getting back to work after our confinement period here in France. Meanwhile, the banks have been edging up the rates since the beginning of the year very, very slowly. So, I'm getting 1.1, 1.68, 1.85. There are lenders that are at 2 and over. I can't say that I work a lot with those lenders, of course, because we try to be competitive for our clients. But then it also depends on what the bank's proposal is, what other things they're asking for in terms of collateral or signing up on services or programs or products that they want attached to the loan as well. So there's a lot of different variables, but the rates have been low, and they're forecasted to stay low for the foreseeable future.
So I just want to say that I call this free money. And it's always better to use OPM, other people's money, when you can.
Absolutely, especially when the cost of borrowing is so low. Absolutely. I'll continue that for rental properties, your rental income can cover the cost of your mortgage repayments, of course, as rentals often can. And some mortgage costs are deductible. Adrian, you have some information to add about that too, right? About costs for rentals that are deductible?
Well, the mortgage, I've always deducted the cost of my mortgage interest on the US side, but I think some of the laws on the US side have changed and I'm not really all that up on it. But I've always reported my interest on the US side
Okay.
rather than on
Well,
the French side.
I'll just comment to everyone listening that as far as any kind of comments we might make, or as far as tax and legal aspects of this, for myself as a mortgage broker, I am held accountable by the Regulatory Society of Mortgage Brokers here in France to stick to commenting on financing. So if you do have tax and legal questions, I'm sure Adrian can direct you to the appropriate people that would be able to answer that. But I'm going to stick to specifically commenting on financing aspects.
Right.
So as far as types of loans, well, so we have, as far as durations, we'll start with that. Start from 5 to 25 years. We generally have our clients really, when they're taking the longest term loan on a non-resident side, it's at 20 years. That's what most of the non-resident lenders are doing. Some have up to 25, but this is where we also get into the age limit to lending, which I know in the US doesn't exist, but in France it does. And that means that the term of your loan needs to be over by the time that you reach the age of 75. Now, that's in theory. In practice, what really happens more so is that the lenders want your loan to be over by the time you've reached retirement age. Now, if you are close to, let's say in your mid-50s, it's possible, if you're 55, it's possible that you could get a loan for 20 years until you reach age 75. Okay, but it's more likely that you'll get offered 15, okay, or somewhere between 15 and 20. Then as we go up in age, 60, 65, again, it's going to be up to about 70 to 70, 72. Okay, well, we try to push it to 75. Where it really makes a difference is what your, basically what your assets are, what your financial profile is. If your financial profile is strong, the banks will want you as a client, and they can be a bit more, they can be flexible on going up into that, to the max term. So we do, of course, have fixed and variable rate mortgages, and most people are taking, again, the fixed rate mortgages because the rates are so good. Interest only is available, but it's tricky to get. That also will depend on your client profile, okay? And it will also count on, you'll be counting on collateral bringing to the bank. You'll have to bring collateral to the bank in order to secure an interest only mortgage. It's a very specific thing. We do get requests for it mainly from British buyers. So that, again, a lot of your financial requests will be considered on a case-by-case basis. Again, interest rates have been staying low since the market started overheating a little bit at the end of, towards the end of 2019. And of course, we've had this little freeze out because of the COVID situation, but still the market is bouncing back quite well, I've got to say. Now, your loan conditions can vary depending on where you're buying property in France. So lenders don't just work nationally, they also can work by region. You know, a lot of the time working with a broker like myself and also my colleagues, what we have is we can have knowledge of someone in a bank in small town in France that's got expertise on how to read a 1040 or a P60 for any UK listeners out there. And so we can find various people that do non-resident financing in different zones of France. So it's not a one-size-fits-all proposition. For US buyers in France, now I'm going to make this clear that FATCA regulations have created restrictions on the number of lenders in France that are available to American residents buying property here. So FATCA really, I mean, Adrian, I'm sure you can comment on this too.
If you do not know what FATCA is, it's the Foreign Account Tax Compliance Act. And it was voted in as part of the HIRE Act in 2010, and basically it places regulations on foreign banks to report their US customers. And that's what Kim's talking about. So just
That's
Google FATCA and you'll find out what a nightmare we have.
Yeah, well, so it's not so what it does technically is one thing. The effect that it has on lenders available is that really, and this is what I hear from my colleagues at the banks that are not working with American clients, is that the bank doesn't want to take on the administrative responsibility of reporting back to the American government. And if they get it wrong, they get the reporting wrong, they can get fined. So they figure it is not worth the risk, not worth the administrative charge to do it. And so a lot of lenders in France don't. Now, having said that, there are solutions for American buyers in France. I am specialized in that clientele, so we can study your request and see what solution might be the right fit for you. Do you qualify? There are a few important points to remember that the banks will be looking for, and also myself when I'm looking at your situation to be able to get you through the hurdles and hoops to a loan. So the consideration, first criteria will be your income. Minimum income requirement for non-resident buyers in France, especially when we're talking about North American buyers. Okay, for British, there could be some more flexibility here. Minimum income requirement is for the household, 100,000 euros net per year. If you are retired,
that's new, isn't it, Kim?
Well, it's, let's just say that we have a couple of lenders that were at minimums of, let's say, 70,000, but they've basically across the board come back and said that now, you know, they want to be at 100,000. Now, that's the income requirement. I'll put a caveat to that if you have assets, okay, if you have a variety of assets that might actually supplement what your annual income is, and this is maybe where I'm mentioning here this next point about retired or nearing, people that are retired or nearing retirement. That's the other aspect that the banks will consider. So it's going to be your full financial picture, what you have going forward if you are nearing retirement. Or, you know, then that doesn't necessarily mean that you're 60 or 65 and, you know, nearing retirement. You could be in your 30s and have been done well for yourself and decide that you want to retire early. I have clients like that as well. So just so you know, it'll be all your assets that the bank will be considering. Another important point is your debt to income ratio. Now, the debt to income ratio is about your monthly outgoings versus your monthly incomings. So your monthly outgoings should not exceed 33% of your monthly incomings. Now, that 33% will also take into account the new loan that you will be taking on in France. Okay, so that 33% includes that potential new loan. Depending on your profile again, and your income level, etc. If it's strong, the banks could go to 40. They might even go a little bit over, but it's really a case-by-case thing. So but that is really a golden rule. Keep that in mind, DTI 33%. Now, cash to bring for the purchase. This is a question that I need to have answered when you contact me. I need to know how much cash you intend to bring to this transaction. Keep in mind that for U.S. buyers, the minimum will be 30% on the down payment, okay? And it'll be—
It used to be 20.
Well, that depends on the lender.
Right.
Okay, so we have lenders that are getting a bit more stringent. I have to put the emphasis on the 30 because getting the 20 is it's a tricky thing to get. So prefer to say 30 because also across the board, that's where I have more lenders available at that rate. Okay, and then 8%, you also need to bring the closing costs, which Adrian had indicated on her slide at around 7 to 7.5%. It's really 7.2. I'm rounding it up to 8. Okay, so we're at 30 plus 8, 38% of the purchase price. That's the cash that you need to keep in mind when you are looking at a figure for a property in France. That's what you would need to bring to the project, okay? Next, if you're self-employed, if you're salaried, it's going to be, they're going to want to see your pay stubs, job contract, that you've been employed with the same company for a couple of years. Now, if you are self-employed, you're considered, of course, an independent business, and you're going to need to bring at least 3 years of your accounting history and tax returns, so profit and loss statements. Of course, what we want to see, what we want to present are steady or improving results. Sometimes, an entrepreneur starts a new business within the last 3 years, there's a dip and that kind of thing. We can explain, we put context around these things. So that's part of my job, is to make sure that your situation and the way you explained it to me, I can get it together so it reads like a nice little storybook that the banker just goes, okay, I get it all approved. That's what we are working towards.
Right, because Kim, as we all know, when you're in business for yourself, for a tax return, you write off as much as you can, and when you actually want to show as little income as possible, which is counterproductive to getting the mortgage. So
that's right. So context is everything. And that's also why, I've had clients that have contacted me after trying on their own, and they've gotten refusals, and they say, why? And I'm looking at their profile and saying, well, if you come to me, I could have wrapped it up in a way that the bank would have just understood what they're looking at. So, what Adrian was talking about at the beginning, about this being different culture, different everything. These are foreign, your documents are foreign to the bankers receiving them. And they may have aptitude and competence in reading the P60s or the 1040s and all of that. But every situation being different, it's best that it be completely explained to them and presented in a cohesive way. Another aspect of getting a loan in France involves mortgage insurance. Now, your mortgage insurance cannot be transferred from a existing life insurance policy to France. It needs to be taken with a French insurer, and most of the time, it's the bank, it's the lender that's giving you who's considering your proposal, who's going to suggest their associated insurer. Okay, that starts off with a health questionnaire that you will complete, and depending on those answers, which I am not privy to, that's your personal confidential medical information. Depending on the answers that you give on the information form, you may be asked to go see your doctor for a doctor's visit. There might be additional exams. It really is a case-by-case basis. It really depends on your health status. Okay, so if there are if there have been a history of medical complications, it's very, very rare that I've seen, and I know, Adrian, you have seen insurance that has not been obtained, but most of the time, even with past complications, we are able to find an insurance policy. Okay, so a couple of things I'll say about insurance. Well, first of all, about the cost of insurance. So it does rise significantly for buyers after 45 years old. That's kind of across the board with most insurance companies. They raise their rates after 45. But you can look for a competitive policy. What I'll say about that is that the bank will generally want you to go, if they have an associated insurer, they'll want you to go with their insurer, okay? And I recommend to clients that they do that unless we are able to get a delegation of insurance, where we're asking the bank if we can go to an insurance broker, or I can go to my company's insurance platform and look for a competitive insurance policy for you. All right, if the bank insists that they really want you to go with their insurer, you're free to do that. And my banking partners won't appreciate me saying this, but I do have to specify the laws have changed in regards to insurance and sticking with the insurance that the bank has provided for you for your loan. You are able to look for another insurance policy after you get your loan and close on your property. So, if your insurance is if you find it's really expensive, you are able to look for another policy. Either, you can contact me and I can put you in touch with an insurance broker, or put you in touch with our insurance policy at my company. So basically, now I've giving you, I think, a pretty thorough overview. If you want to get situated on what you might be able to afford, please do contact me. Again, download that form that, Patty, is it pinned in the chat?
Yeah, I see it in the chat.
Okay, great. So please do go to the chat and download my form. My email address and contact information is also on that form, and you can send it back to me and we can get you situated. I think we are.
Thank you, Kim. Why don't you
You are very welcome.
stop sharing your screen temporarily, if you don't mind.
I don't.
People have been putting questions in the chat. Some of them are directed only to me. Others are open to everyone. So I'm going to look through the ones that have been directed to me only and pull up some of these questions. Okay. One person, let's see, Vicky wants to know, wants us to address finding a property in Nice. Finding a property anywhere in France is basically the same process. There's nothing different. Let's see, Victoria wants to know if Corona has changed the difficulty in getting a French visa. This webinar is not about visas, but you cannot get a visa at the moment because the offices are closed. And I just suggest you go to the official website, and when they reopen, you'll be able to apply for your visa. It has nothing to do with property. There's no relationship between owning a property and getting a visa whatsoever. Let's see, here's Teresa. She said she planned to be in Paris June 2020 to search for a rental property, and that's not going to happen. Is it realistic to believe a relocation will be possible by the end of 2020? What I have no idea how the countries are going to open their borders or not. But I know that we have a 100-kilometer radius limit right now. As of June 2nd, that's going to open up, so we'll at least be able to travel within the country. But I would like to think that by fall, we're all going to be able to travel again. But I'm not the authority on this.
Well, the French want to go on their vacations too, so
the French are going to want to, yes, the French are going to want to take their vacations. That is for sure. Let's see. Christy wants to know, is there a place where we can find all of my episodes on House Hunters? There is a page on my website that lists all the shows, but there's no one place where you can see them all other than House HGTV and whether they're airing them or not. How is the rental market? This is from Lisa Labar. How's the rental market during pandemic in Nice? There is no rental market. There is no purchase market. There is no market during the pandemic, period. It is just now starting to open up. What I suggest, though, is that now is the best time to consider a purchase. Everybody's hungry. Everybody's ready. I think that now is the time to find bargains because properties who have been sitting on the market, whether they're for rent or for purchase, will be grabbed up quickly and probably at about the best price you're going to find right about now. Let's see. How does owning a property in France affect visa? Nothing. Has nothing to do with visa. Okay, so Rebecca wants to know, some of this is US specific, but she's in Canada. The rules apply, well, Canada doesn't have FATCA rules. So Kim, maybe you can address the situation for Canadians versus Americans.
Okay, well, I can tell you that there are the banks, some of the banks are sensitive to Canadian buyers just as they are to Americans as well. I would tell you that the conditions would be similar to American buyers. So it's that 30% plus the 8% for notary fees to bring to the purchase. The lenders that would be available for US would also do Canadian. So Canadian loans for Canadian buyers as well.
Okay, now here's another. Mary Elizabeth asks, is the mortgage insurance included in the monthly mortgage payment or how is it paid?
the mortgage insurance actually is a cost that's tacked on to the loan. And so it adds a cost of zero, depending on the cost of the insurance, 0.30 to 0.35% to the overall cost of the loan. And then it's broken down per month on your mortgage payment.
I think I like this question best of all. It's from Tricia Murphy. Why would Paris not move to the MLS system to make the process easier on buyers and sellers, or just not how France does business? That is something that various people have tried over the years to get the agents to all come together, but they don't see the benefit in sharing. It is cultural. It's never going to happen, probably not as long as any of us are alive. So, and they're not willing to share commissions. As long as they can sell a property themselves without having to do that, that's what they're going to do. But we could have a cultural conversation from here from here until the other side of the pond. Kim, what is the typical cost for mortgage insurance?
Again, it's really depends on your health status. So the range is 0.30 to 0.35% of the cost added onto the cost of your loan. If you are a smoker, if you are skydiving, you know, your insurance, and you're older and you're over 45, your insurance will be a lot more expensive than someone who is 35 and works out all the time and has no health issues, and so they'll be at that lower range. Yeah, so you know, it's not a fixed cost. Again, it's just a factor of your personal health situation and how the insurer deems that.
Okay, thank you. Okay, Lisa Hall, she wants to know what are the best practices to manage a renovation from a distance? And my answer to that is hire someone who's qualified to manage a renovation from a distance. And Martine Di Matteo is the person we recommend. All of her clients are at a distance. When you work with her, you walk in and the apartment is just locked, stock and barrel, ready to go. There's nothing for you to do except deal with her directly. So I don't think it's something you want to do from a distance unless you've, overseeing it really well. How does financing differ for citizens versus non-citizens?
Of the U.S.?
Well,
France. France.
Citizens are.
Okay, so the financing, the difference really has to do more so with a couple of things. First thing is the interest rate. The interest rate for non-residents will be higher than for residents, and that seems pretty logical at least from the bank's perspective, because they're taking a higher risk on a non-resident buyer or borrower because of the fact that their assets, their source of income, their main residence really would be considered, it's in their main the country of tax residence. So that the interest rate is generally higher. Let's say the ballpark prime or bonus that the add-on that the banks will put on to their rate between non-resident and resident is 0.3%. So if you're shopping around on the internet for rates in France and you're seeing, 1% and 0.8% or 1.2%, a lot of those rates, 99% of the time, are not available to non-residents.
Okay. Let's see. Phil Tremo wants to know how a strong credit score in the U.S. can help with the process.
Credit score does not apply in France. Sorry, I know everyone tries to keep their shiny, high credit score as a badge of pride in the United States, but here it is not relevant at all. The banks are going to look at, again, your income solidity over the last few years, the last 3 years, They're going to look at your assets and your liabilities. That's really it. Credit score does not count.
Does not compute.
No.
Okay, so Cecilia asks if she's found a property and would like to make an offer, is it as simple as sending the offer to the agency via email? You can make an offer on a napkin if you want. I'm not sure I suggest doing that, but it can happen. It's a very informal process. But I would advise everyone to have help in doing this. And whether it's us or another, another consulting firm, I don't suggest doing it on your own because there's too many pitfalls along the way. Here's one. Is there a bridge lending for down payment? I'm not sure I understand the question.
Oh, well, bridge lending within, there's bridge lending exists for residents of France when they are selling they're selling one of their French properties and buying another one. In that case, bridge lending exists. There isn't bridge lending available for non-residents wanting on a purchase in France. That would not be available.
Okay. Deborah wants to know, are there short sales in Paris? I've never seen a short sale.
The closest thing I've seen to a short sale are those auctions that the notaires have, but those are, incredibly.
Right, those are auctions for people who have defaulted on their loans.
It's a whole other animal, and there are a lot of property pros that are in there trying to get their deals. So good luck with that. Yeah. That's very, very tough.
So, okay, Kathy wants to know, as an American, she's asking me, do I have to file U.S. taxes and French taxes, and will we have to continue to do that if and when we move to France? The point is that as an American citizen, the U.S. is citizenship-based taxation, and you have to file U.S. taxes regardless of where you live, where you earn your money. It doesn't matter. You have to file with the U.S. If you're living in France, then you will, more than 6 months a year, you will become tax resident in France. But that is a very specific situation to each individual. So I suggest we talk about that individually. Here's someone who she has an EU citizenship, Italian citizenship, and would this help her in any step of the process?
EU citizenship for you? Yeah, EU citizenship, yes. Okay. This is what I have to say about people have double, two different citizenships. If as soon as you're American, okay, you can be anything European, but as soon as you have that American aspect, you'll be considered by the banks that only lend to that lend.
It triggers FATCA immediately, is the point.
Yeah, it triggers FATCA, exactly. Right. So that's it. And then, having said that, with those lenders, of course, any kind of foothold on the continent is good. And if you already own property in France and you're American buying property in France, that's also good. It's always good if you already have a little bit of a foothold here. And that doesn't mean opening up a bank account. You do not need to open a bank account to get a loan in France. The lender who's giving you the loan will open a bank account for you, out of which they will be expecting to withdraw those monthly mortgage payments for your French property. Okay, so you don't need to open up.
Oh, this is a really good point you're making.
Yeah,
because,
I get that question a lot.
Well, yes, because we facilitate opening bank accounts for our clients on it's a service that we offer because I have a relationship with a particular bank. But it has backfired when a client has opened a commercial bank account and then transferred the money into that account thinking they were going to need that toward the purchase of the property. And then when they went to apply for the loan, the lending bank saw that bank account with all that money in it and denied them specifically because of having that account. So if they have an account for just commercial use and there's no money in it, then it's not a big deal. I mean, your lender will not care, but they want to open a bank account for the client.
That's right. A lot of the time, well, as far as this is where I can talk about what I hear from my colleagues at the banks and current interest rates. The rates are low. The banks aren't making money off of your loan. They're making money off of the bank services that they're offering you, the bank account fees, these small transactions you might do, the insurance, the associated insurance they can offer, the home insurance, for property insurance that you may take with them. That's where they're making their money. So they really want to have you as a client, and they will open up a bank account for your loan.
Okay. Can we create, this is Nate, can we create a mortgage under himself and his partner if they are not married?
Yes. Okay, so now this is where we kind of get into the relationship between the two buyers. So if it's two people who are unmarried, but they've been in a common law relationship for a few years, that's fine. When it gets to friends buying together, that's where the banks start to get a bit more sensitive because they figure, as opposed to let's say a marital or love relationship they put more faith in that continuing on the long term of a loan on a property purchase than a bunch of friends buying a couple of friends buying a property together to share. Okay, so that'll be tougher to finance.
But this is where an SCI might be valuable, right?
The SCI, well, yes, correct. Well, yes, the SCI would come into play probably more in either of those two cases. I will just say, though, even when purchasing through an SCI, the bank will look for the nature of the relationship among the borrowers. Okay, so the love relationship will count more. Family relationship is ideally what they're looking for when people are buying in an SCI. But otherwise, friends investing together in property can be tricky. Need to look at that. Might not go through. It has to be considered. But long-term common law is fine.
Okay. Rebecca wants to know if it's possible to mortgage a property in your home country and use that equity for a purchase in France, skipping the French mortgage. Yes.
Sure.
It's called a line of credit. You take a line of credit, you've got the cash, and then it has nothing to do with France.
Yeah.
Yes.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay. Just to clarify, this is Joelle. Just to clarify, only U.S. buyers with 100,000 euro income would be eligible to purchase in France? Question mark. No.
I'm sorry. Can you repeat that?
Okay. So it's just to clarify, only U.S. buyers with 100,000 income would be eligible to purchase in France? Question mark.
No. So
it's universal.
This is what we want to see. We would ideally like to see that. Okay. Now, as I said, however, if you have other assets, it really depends on everything that you're bringing to the table. Then the banks will look at that. But if you are earning 40, 50,000 a year and you're in the U.S. and that's your household income, I'm afraid that it's going to be very difficult to get you to qualify. Okay, I think really when we're talking about 70,000 and up net household income with other assets to bring to the table, meaning other assets would be investment accounts, retirement accounts, property that you own, just showing that you have that financial solidity behind you, that you're solvent in strong position, that can help convince the bank.
So I have several questions here about fractional ownership. So there seems to be a lot of interest in that. And I'd like to just say that, first of all, you cannot borrow money to buy a fractional share. You have to have cash to buy a fractional share. And that's because of the structure of the fractional property itself. There are only a few properties here in Paris that are offering shares at the moment. I'm only aware of a couple of them. I have no shares myself for sale. I'm looking for actually people who are willing to invest in creating a fractional ownership property, because there is quite a bit of interest in it. But this is outside of the realm of this webinar. So if you're interested in fractional, you might want to just drop me an email separately. It's not a simple thing. It's a business. Whoever wants to get involved in it, just understand that it's, you know, it's not quite as simple as buying a property for yourself. How hard is it to get 4 cats through the system if we become residents? Does anybody know about that?
Well, I think that actually it's
I don't think
not
it's a
hard.
problem.
No, I don't think so. You have to, well, you obviously have to go to the vet. I just suggest that you, obviously, you're going to do a little bit of internet research, but from what I know, as far as bringing my cats to the US, it's, well, they've got a French passport, and then they get their shots, and then they can get on the plane with me with the additional cost. I think it's the same thing over here. There's no, from what I understand at this point,
There's no quarantine.
no quarantine, like, right, the UK I know has quarantine for animals.
It's more about how you're going to carry 4 cats over on the plane. Right?
Yeah.
I would imagine. Okay, so Julie wants to know, can an American seller and American buyer complete a sales transaction in the US and then use a French notaire to transfer the title? No, 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 and no. Everything has to go through here. And I said that from the beginning. Next question, what are the capital gains taxes for non-EU residents? That is a big fat subject. Capital gains tax is basically the same for everyone, with the exception of the Social Security taxes that are charged anyway, even if you shouldn't be paying them, and then you have to request a reimbursement. But capital gains does diminish over the course of 30 years. On a secondary property, there's no capital gains tax paid on a primary residence. So if that helps you guys. Thanks for the webinar. Do you have a presence in Normandy? We can have a presence in Normandy. We can have a presence anywhere in France. None of it's very complicated. Next question. If you spend more than 183 days a year in France, are you subject to French wealth tax on your worldwide assets? Basically, yes. If you're tax resident in France, but there are tax treaties, and this is a very complicated subject, and I am certainly not the one to answer them, and I suggest speaking with tax professionals. Let's see, what are the issues with short-term rentals? In other words, can we rent our properties in Paris on Airbnb anymore? Okay, I'm going to say it one more time. If it's a primary, and it has nothing to do with Airbnb, if you have a primary residence here in France or in Paris, you can rent it short-term up to 4 months a year. If it is a secondary residence, you can only rent it on a 1-year term, 1-year basis, or you can rent on a mobility lease. In Nice, you can rent short-term up to 6 months, up to 6 years. No other cities are enforcing these regulations that we know of. Only Paris and Nice, and that's only because they have housing shortages. Otherwise, the laws just sit on the books and nobody really cares that much about them. What is the minimum lease for renting a property in Paris? 1 night, 1 year, 3 years. Just depends on what kind of property it is. In the news media, it is reported many are leaving Paris for less crowded areas in the country. Are you seeing an increase in the number of properties for sale? We have seen nothing. Market has been suspended. There's literally nothing happening on the market until now. It's just now starting to open up. So your guess is as good as anyone's. And all of the professionals are talking right now, but the trends, whatever ones that were the trends before, we have no idea if that's going to continue to trend in the same way. now that we're in a kind of deconfinement. We're not in a total deconfinement. I think it's going to be months before we see anything normal in any way, shape, or form. Let's see, it's now 7:20. You guys want us to continue with questions? I see everybody's still here. Shake your heads. Yes, we'll continue with questions. Okay, I have read that the buyer pays for the seller's real estate agent's fees. Nobody mentioned this today. Is that still true? Okay, big subject. Here's the way it works. The mandate between the seller and the agent dictates whether the buyer pays it or the seller pays it. It's a matter of semantics because it's included in the selling price of the property. So it doesn't really matter who pays it, the buyer or the seller, except that it does matter slightly because if the buyer pays it, then the price of the property is reduced on the deed, and that reduces the tax basis, so it reduces the notarial taxes and fees. But it also changes the mortgage. So if the seller pays it, then it's included on the price on the deed, and then the taxes, the notarial taxes and fees are based on the higher amount, and then the higher amount can also be mortgaged. So it is tricky, and it can even be trickier because that mandate, if the notaire has not seen it, it is possible to get that mandate changed if you want it, but it's not always possible, and it really is. It's one of the things that we negotiate and do as part of doing the proper due diligence and the negotiations. So that was a good question. Are the taxes different for residents versus non-residents? Well, that depends on which taxes you're talking about. It is possible that if you're a primary resident here, that you will not have taxe d'habitation. I no longer pay taxe d'habitation because I'm a primary resident here, but I still do pay taxe foncière. And the taxes do differ if it's a primary residence versus a secondary. The taxes are higher on second homes. Not by much though. The taxes are so low that it's hardly anything to talk about. Let's see. Are there ever properties for lease to purchase? Maybe that's for you, Kim.
Properties leased to purchase. Well, that would
Like
be
creating a mortgage.
Yeah, that's kind of
That's almost as if the seller is holding the mortgage.
that's correct. So that in that case, would there be? It would be difficult to get a loan on that through a bank because it has to do with the mortgage, the guarantee. And the bank, when they're giving a loan, they're taking a mortgage, they're taking a guarantee on the property. If you're doing if you're doing a rent to buy, rent to own, the owner will continue to hold the mortgage on that property. It's not available to the bank as a first rank.
Right. Well, I have a client who's actually doing that right now. I have a client who's actually selling the property and holding the mortgage, and the notaire is managing that document. The notaire is doing it, but it has nothing to do with the bank because, in effect, the seller is the bank. Here's a question about diagnostics. The diagnostics by the seller replaces an inspection, but what recourse is available and at what point in the process to the buyer when the seller has hidden some defect in the property? Well, I personally know about that very, very well because if there's a defect, if it's hidden, it would have been disclosed as part of all those diagnostics. And it would not have been discovered until later, till it was too late. And maybe the diagnostics didn't cover it, or maybe the notaire didn't cover it. I was the victim of a hidden defect when I purchased my niece property, and that's because the Sani Bruyere, which is a macerating toilet, was not disclosed. And so I suppose I could have sued the notaire, but instead I sued the seller who didn't declare it or disclose it to the notaire. And I can tell you that that was a 7 or 8 year lawsuit and a ridiculous amount of money. So these are the kinds of things you want to be very careful about. Let's see.
Oh, and you know what? I'll add into that question just to kind of tout the value of Adrian's services and the fact that I did, as we mentioned at the beginning, work with Adrian as a property search consultant for a few years. This is part of what Adrian's group does. They will go through the documents and really vet any kind of faults or deficiencies on the property, so you are aware of what you're buying. Okay.
Well, that's the point. And in fact, the fact that that happened to me, okay, was quite a learning experience, because since then, our notaire ensures that every toilet is accounted for. It's not just, glossed over. And that was as a result of what happened to me. And it's kind of a joke now that on every deed, it says the toilet is not a sanipoyer. Okay, so what are the loan setup fees typically? So I guess that's your origination fee.
Yeah. Well, origination fees actually, so there was a question in the chat with how do I charge? So loan setup fees. Working with me is similar to working with the real estate agent. I charge upon success. So I am not charging upfront at this point. It's really about getting the loan for you. And once I do an assessment to see whether or not you qualify at that point, that's when you're buying the property, etc. I'm accompanying you through the entire loan negotiation, and it's really upon closing. Once you have the keys to the property, you've closed with on the property with a loan that I've sourced for you. That's when I would be sending you my invoice for my services. I charge on a percentage, small percentage, based on the loan amount. So it really depends. I have to evaluate how much work is involved, because not everybody's situation is the same. Generally, I'm at 2% of the loan amount. And so it's basically free to work with me up until you have secured that loan. And if at some point you need to walk away from the transaction, I cannot invoice for my services at this point. That is how we're working.
Okay, I'd like to say at this point that we've got about 3 more minutes. I'd like to end the webinar at our time, 7:30, in about 3 minutes. So we're going to handle just a couple more questions and remind everyone that this is being recorded. I also highly recommend that you talk to us individually about your individual situations, because there's no way that in an hour and a half we can possibly cover this subject, which has taken us many, many years to grasp. And so we're just going to end with a couple of questions. Let's see. Is there any problems with your children inheriting your property in France? No. In fact, the French want your children to inherit your property. There's forced heirship laws here, but you can elect U.S. laws for inheritance purposes. That does not avoid the taxation, however. This is a subject that we will discuss at great length when you set up the structure of your purchase. Let's see, Kenneth Byrne. Kim, how do you get compensated for your services? I think you just described that, right?
Yes.
Okay, how much time living in France are you considered a resident? Well, you can't be here more than 90 days without some sort of visa. So there's tax residency and then there's residency. Tax residency has to do with the 183-day rule, tax rule, meaning you're here more than 183 days, or where you consider home. And these are questions for taxation, not really related to property. What is the formula for determining how much house you can buy in Paris? In the US, it's typically 2 times the annual salary. So Kim, you're saying?
Again, it's that
Great.
DTI, going to be the DTI, the debt to income ratio, your incomings versus your outgoings. And again, we're working with income, meaning net income, okay? And so the margin that you have there, that 33%, hopefully your incoming versus outgoings is at 28 or 25, and you've got that 10% more margin on your income. That would be the margin of what you'd be able to afford. We can work those figures out for you.
Okay. It is now 7:30. I want to thank you, Kim, very much. I want to thank everyone for being here. You probably will have follow-up questions. Just direct them to info@adrianleeds.com, or for Kim, your email, which was on your slide.
That's right. It's a little bit more complicated. k.bingham@private-rate.com.
Okay, and I hope you all have a wonderful Memorial Day. Thank you very much. We will be sending out a link to the recording to all of you so that you can look back at it, and we hope that this has been very informative for you. So thank you very much. Bye-bye, everyone.
Thanks. Bye-bye.